BBC, which was formerly your employer, in more trouble today, having to admit in a report that they were, shall we say, less than good at passing on a complaint that was made about Huw Edwards. And it looks very much now as though The Sun, which was very much vilified at the time for publishing the story, has actually been kind of exonerated, really, because it now turns out that the BBC have had to apologise to the family in question. And BBC, again, failing to live up to expectations.
It's absolutely dreadful. And why am I not surprised in this case? You know, I think the Director General of the BBC is not just the Director General, he's also the Editor-in-Chief. And in Tim Davie, I'm sure that he's a brilliant marketing man, good at selling cola or whatever it was he used to sell, but he's never spent a single day in a newsroom. And yet he's the Editor-in-Chief. And I think you need to have good antennae on a story like this. You have to be all over it. You have to be on top of it, because otherwise it gets out of control and it turns into a scandal. It's a personal tragedy for the man we're looking at there, Huw Edwards, but these things did happen. We're entitled to know up to a certain point why they happened, how they happened, and how the BBC handled it. Otherwise, it's going to look like another whitewash. And of course, we still haven't got to the bottom in any way, shape or form of the Bashir scandal, the interview in 1995, Martin Bashir for Panorama, Diana, Princess of Wales, when she was the most famous, the most photographed woman in the world. The skulduggery that went on surrounding that and the cover-up afterwards have yet to be made clear. And scandal after scandal, it's not doing the BBC any good as it approaches 2027 and the renewal of the Royal Charter. And what's the Royal Charter? It's its license to carry on broadcasting.
Exactly right. Michael, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed, as ever, for talking to us. The panel is back with me. I mean, the big question for a lot of people today in the result of this inquiry is how much longer is Huw Edwards going to be in receipt of his money? You know, we all might feel sorry for him and we might feel that, you know, it's unfortunate that he can't come back to work, which is what it's looking like. But he's on like $500,000 a year. Yeah. And he hasn't worked since last July. Yeah. So how long do you keep him on? By the way, talking of the Director General who used to sell Coca-Cola for a living, the woman in charge of all this, BBC's Chief Operating Officer, Lee Tavaziza, used to be Customer Relations Officer at British Gas.
There you go.
And then she's in charge of the BBC.
Absolutely astonishing.
What's going on?
That it took 7 weeks for such serious allegations. And the BBC are saying, oh, we get lots of these kind of, you know, totally unfounded, spurious kind of claims all the time. No, we're talking about the top presenter, and also we're talking about, you know, the highest paid news presenter at the corporation. And we're also talking about a family's, the family of the young person involved, contacting them with specific and very, very serious concerns. The fact that, look, we live in an era of email. This isn't as though someone went into a regional office up in wherever and they just didn't talk to the right person. It's an email chain. It's we live in a culture of HR, of safeguarding. We know that this kind of thing needs to be either addressed or, you know, someone needs to contact the person involved or the family involved.
And that's the biggest question.
That it took 7 weeks and seems to have sort of fallen down.
And it only really came out in public because the Sun ran the story.
Exactly, because the family, in desperation, got no response from the BBC and then went to the paper.
And what the BBC said at the time is they get hundreds of complaints, which is why it sort of got lost. But the spotlight needs to be shone on why they have this particular process, why it took so long.
They claim they're going to improve the process now, and they're going to speed it up. But again...
Well, how many times has this happened over the years,
and that's the problem. You talked about the scandals.
Well, there are so many names, aren't there?
Which part of Jimmy Savile do they not remember? Surely after Jimmy Savile, they have to be on heightened alert to present it. You know, I mean...
And certainly people did discuss, didn't they, at the time, that, you know, the BBC was a place where you were not encouraged, if you were, say, a young production assistant or a young journalist, to make any kind of comment whatsoever about the talent. You know, you couldn't say anything about it. You couldn't even dream of criticising something because it was clear that there was quite a lot of other people who had been affected by some of Huw Edwards' activities, you know.
And that there was a lot of fear around that presenter specifically, actually. and not being able to, the feeling that you couldn't challenge that behaviour.
Absolutely, it begs into question. I interviewed Greg Dyke for the Royal Television Society. We talked to Tim Davie as well about the whole process. And all of this, they always sort of say trust comes in on foot and leaves on horseback. And if there's ever been a time where trust in the BBC has been at an all-time low, it's because scandal upon scandal, and it's about
the last
processes.
12 months, Ben, have been pretty horrific, haven't they, for the BBC? I can't think of one positive. I mean, when I was talking earlier, you know, you've got the whole, you know, anti-Israel bias. You've got Jeremy Bowen, the Middle East correspondent, claiming that the Israelis had blown up a hospital, and then later saying that it was wrong to say it, but that he didn't regret getting it wrong. You know, and then only this week we had the BBC leaving out the rather important information about that horrible trans cat killer who happened to be transgender. They referred to the killer as a woman. You know, deliberately misleading the public.
Yes, and as your previous guest said, I mean, the Bashir stuff is still
Bashir,
going on in the background.
List goes on and on.
I mean, the strange thing with Huw Edwards is, if I remember correctly, wasn't it Victoria Derbyshire? Sort of her programme was investigating allegations against him already before the story was released.
Off.
So the BBC don't come out of this well at all.
No.
As you say, the Sun's pretty vindicated.
Well, the Sun actually have got a spread in front of me in tomorrow's paper, pages 4 and 5, which suggests to me it might be on the front of the paper as well. 9 months to say sorry, it's ripped our family apart. And that's from the mother of the young teenager who's at the centre of these claims, who was basically paid, let's not forget, 35,000 quid for a series of pictures and explicit images over 3 years. I mean, it's not as if it was, you know, I made a mistake, I did something stupid. 3 years it went on, £35,000.
You know, you remember the Philip Schofield case? And there are questions, and we don't know everything, do we? But there are, you know, suggestions that they were in a relationship. This is different. When you are paying someone, paying them for cash to send you sexual pictures, and they are 17 years old, probably younger actually at the time. You know, I do think that someone of Huw Edwards is intelligent, and there's nothing to do with his sexuality, whatever gender. We're not talking about that specifically.
Not at all.
But you do know what you are doing is possibly not good, and you also are aware that you're a presenter at the BBC and that you have a, you know, position.
And as many people have said as well, you know, you look back, and I don't know if the BBC have even resolved this particular problem, but when you look back to various important events that Huw Edwards was the go-to guy for, you're going to have to hear his voice. You know, his career may be over at the BBC, but there's an awful lot of footage which is archived.
Many royal
which
events.
you can't really redo. I mean, I don't know what you do about that.
Well, yes, you can redo it with technology, but you're right.
Well,
the reality
you could.
Is,
but you can't. I mean, the BBC could they, put out, you know, the footage of, say, you know, the Queen's death with somebody else's voice?
No, they shouldn't. I mean, they can technically, but
I think
the reality
feels like
is exactly that.
For many people, that feels very, very disrespectful, because he did break that news.
Well, he was the voice of the BBC. He was the voice, as you say, for these historic moments.
But now you find yourself thinking, what was he doing while he was doing that? You know, because the stories that were being told at the time of his behaviour were quite shocking.
Well, and there's two separate things. There's one, the unwise but not illegal, that sort of rings in everybody's ears for a different sort of case. But this is about the whole process. What happens in the BBC? Have they improved these sort of complaints procedure as a result? Because time and time again, there's yet another case and so on and so forth. And as I say, that's what's happened. You're looking at these sort of things. Have they handled it in the appropriate way? What lessons have been learned? And so far, we need to get clarity on that sort of side.
And how can you defend continuing someone's salary at that level when it's a publicly funded corporation? And also, I mean, either they need to make a decision and sack him or keep him on. But at the moment, they seem to be in this kind of stasis where he just keeps getting...
It would depend on his contract as well. So you don't know if it's...
I'm pretty sure you could get gross misconduct out of that.
Yeah, I mean, it seems unthinkable.
Well, you would in any other company, wouldn't you?
It seems unthinkable we'll see him on our screens again. I mean,
I don't think there's anyone that would suggest that he's coming back. I think almost everyone says that's not going to happen.
So then the question is why are they still paying him for?
Well, they'll have some obsession about duty of care. He's still
all that sort of thing.
So we're paying for it. It's tax.
Exactly. Listen, you don't get an argument with me. I'm just telling you what they would say, which is that if he's still receiving treatment for some kind of mental health issue, they might feel it's premature to get rid of him. But they'll have to bite the bullet at some point. You know, what if he continues to say he's in need of mental health treatment for another 10 years?
We need clarity on those. You're right.
Is he going to make, you know, 5 million quid?
Yeah.
I don't think people would want that.
And also, I can't get over that it took 9 months for them to to reach this conclusion.
Yeah.
You think this could have all been wrapped up and sort of buried it.
Well, this is the thing about these reports. They take so long.
I know.
Yes. I mean, look at the different reports that the police are doing.
Right.
I mean,
well, look at the COVID inquiry. How many years is that going to be? The cost of these things is eye-watering.
It really is. And, you know, the SNP up in Scotland, the police investigating them, how long is that going to take? You know, that's been going for a long time.